Do you find it tough to pay for the minutes for your phone every month? Well, then you might be in the market for a cheap SUV. That's right, right behind me today, I got a 2013 Nissan Murano with nearly 185,000 miles on it. Now, sometimes Nissan is not at the top of everyone's list when they're looking for an affordable used car. But today we're gonna decide if you should consider one of these. We're gonna take a walk around the outside, we're gonna talk about the common problems, and then we're gonna decide if the Nissan Murano is a buy or a bust. Starting up front on our Nissan Murano. Now, I think over the prior generation of Murano, Nissan did a lot to improve the styling on these, but I wanna hear your thoughts on what these guys look like. They're, you know, it's a subjective thing, but it's not one of my favorite styles. However, I actually do think that they look a little bit newer and have aged decently well. As far as wear and tear on the outside, I don't have a whole lot to talk to you about other than there is some subframe rust issues. A lot of the times the bodies will show just fine, and then underneath there will be rust issues. So it's definitely one that you want to have someone who knows what they're looking at, check out underneath the car and make sure you're not buying something unsafe. Now, Nissan is also pretty bad about oxidation on the headlights. Their plastic just yellows really bad. This car has a little bit of it, but that is a typical Nissan problem. It's easy to clean up, not a huge deal, but definitely something to look out for. Under the hood of our Murano, we have Nissan's 3.5 liter V6 that makes 260 horsepower, 240 pound-feet of torque. Those power numbers are pretty solid for a vehicle of this size. I got no complaints. That's very, you know, average or even good numbers for a vehicle of this year and generation. Now, this engine actually is a pretty solid engine overall, but there is some common problems with the actual like sort of accessories and things with it that you need to keep an eye out for if you're looking at a used one. We'll start off with two of your belt-driven accessories over on the side of the engine. One is the power steering pump, the other is the alternator. Alternators just tend to fail at around 100,000 miles, something like that. So if you notice a battery light come up or you're having a dead battery issue, a lot of times it is a failing alternator, not a terribly expensive fix. The other is the power steering pump failing, and that is actually generally due to some line leaks, the actual lines for the power steering pump, which starves it of fluid, and then the power steering pump fails. Again, this is not a terribly expensive fix, but it is something that's somewhat common on these cars. Now, things that could lead to even larger issues that you need to look out for. One is the radiator failing and clogging over time. Kind of a typical problem with these cars. If you notice that you're running a little bit hot on your temp, anything like that, it is probably time for a new radiator. Again, this is a kind of routine type of a fix on these cars and is not terribly expensive. And since we're talking about fluid stuff, let's talk about engine oil. The oil cooler gaskets can leak on these, and then the valve cover gaskets as they age will leak. That is typical kind of across all manufacturers, where when a car now 14 years old, the gaskets, the rubber gaskets start to crack and wear out. Typical stuff, but something to keep an eye out for if you notice that you're losing a little bit of oil or there's a puddle on the ground. Now, this engine is mated to a CVT transmission. And if you Google Nissan and the letters CVT, you're not gonna find any good reports, because Nissan was one of the early adopters to the CVT transmissions, and unfortunately they had a bunch of failures. Fluid changes are absolutely a must. They say between like 30 and 60,000 miles. I think absolutely every 30,000 miles you need to change the fluid in the CVT transmission if you want it to be a good operating transmission for many, many years to come. You have to take these on a test drive, go low speed, go high speed, around in town, kind of stop and go stuff, and get on the vehicle hard and make sure that the transmission seems to pull consistently and not clunking or, you know, inconsistent speed up or anything like that. So these transmissions, unfortunately, are quite problematic and have had a ton of failures. Now this is an all-wheel drive vehicle, and actually the all-wheel drive system is pretty decent in these. Not a lot of issues, pretty good system there. I don't have anything to really look out for other than change the fluid on schedule and you should be good to go. Overall, this powertrain really is just let down by the transmission. The engine I like, even though there does have some smaller issues. I think these engines will run to 250 or 300,000 with normal maintenance with very few problems. And the transmission is just kind of a best of luck scenario. Moving on to the interior of the Nissan Murano here now. And I actually have to say, I was pleasantly surprised when I got inside here. It still has some quirky design stuff, but it actually looks and feels nicer and newer than it kind of is. It is worn remarkably well. I don't have a lot to talk about. Yes, the seat foam probably is the biggest thing that I noticed is kind of worn out, but it's 100 and almost 85,000 miles on it. There's a lot of soft touch materials. This is a loaded up car, so it does have pretty much all the options. And even has some nice features as far as like lane departure warnings and things like that weren't always common back in 2013. Now, as far as electronics and things like that you need to look out for if you're looking at a used one, HVAC blend doors are very common and a difficult thing to replace. The part is not expensive, but the getting to that part is if you're going to have a mechanic do it. So if you are looking at a used one, make sure that the AC or heat switch back and forth properly and that it goes from foot or up to the head or anything like that. Just check out all of the heating and cooling stuff to make sure you don't have any issues there. Other things to look out for is if there is a smell of moisture or mustiness inside. The sunroofs are also kind of famous for leaking or just breaking in general. Sometimes the drain lines will get clogged, things like that. So make sure there's no moisture inside the car. This car is equipped with the Bose sound system, which is for the higher optioned vehicles, but the amplifier, the Bose amplifier, is known to fail. So if you have no audio through your speakers, it's probably that part that has gone bad. Overall, the interior, if I was going to compare it to the other Japanese automakers, Honda, Toyota out there, even in their high trimmed cars from this generation, this is better. This is a more comfortable, better materials, better wear and tear even on the inside here than some of their counterparts out there. So overall, I'm actually very impressed. Now on to the rear seat area of the Murano, and I am again impressed. I have tons of legroom, tons of headroom. The seat itself is soft and comfortable. One of the more comfortable ones that I've sat in. Not a lot of wear and tear. The only thing I noticed is the leather or the vinyl material on the back of the seat is coming unglued a little bit. I mean, it's typical stuff that you would expect, but the door panels are nice and still soft materials back here. I am very impressed, actually. I think you could road trip back here with no issues, and it has the dual sunroofs. Now, we went over the problems with them, but you do have a sunroof up here as well. Now, before I show you the trunk area here, I want to show you something that is a common problem with these. Now, this one is operating fine, but the auto lift for the hatch on these is a very common thing to break. So if you go and look at one, you might have to operate it manually. It's not the worst thing in the world and not the most expensive thing to fix, but it is a very common problem. Now, as far as space and things like that, plenty of space. You have nice handles on either side to drop the seats up there. It's a really well thought out trunk area with plenty of space. Pulling out onto the road in our Nissan Murano. And again, I know I said it under the hood, but I can't stress enough, you got to take these on a good long test drive if you're looking at a higher mileage used one. First things first that we're going to do here on our test drive is get on it and see how she feels. Actually pulled plenty strong. This is before they were doing simulated shifts or anything like that with these transmissions, which is commonplace now in the CVTs, but no shifting, anything like that. It felt like it grabbed well, and I don't feel any weird clunks or anything so far with this transmission. The engine on these cars, I will say, always feels just a little bit louder than some engines. So if you take it on a test drive, they are a noisier engine, but I actually really do like these engines. They have solid power, pretty smooth power, and I don't have a lot of complaints with them. So just a little bit more audible on the inside. We are cruising now on a back road that does have some bumps and things like that. I don't have any, clunks in the suspension that I've noticed yet. I don't have any really weird vibrations or anything like that. I wouldn't say it necessarily feels like the suspension is like a new car, but it feels pretty good. Things to look out for as they age is really nothing too crazy as far as suspension wear and tear. Everything on them holds up as good as any other manufacturer, but at 150, 200,000 miles, you will be replacing just about everything underneath of it because that's typical wear and tear stuff. Now let's talk about fuel mileage, and these guys are right in that meaty part of the curve. Very average, 19 and 24, pretty much where all the other V6 crossover SUVs are, so no surprises there. Not great, not terrible. As we're driving down now straight on the road, it centers pretty decently on the highway. It seems to be driving really decently, actually. This interior is very comfortable inside. In a lot of ways, I'm actually impressed with the car. Doing one more little pull here from a get-go just to feel that transmission again. Yeah, it feels like a well-operating CVT, which is not the best driving experience, but it actually, I think this one is operating as it should. I have seen people who have gotten a ton of miles out of their CVT transmission. In fact, we reviewed an Altima that had an early CVT in it, and it had a ton of miles on it, kind of like this one, and it was operating just fine. I think the biggest issue really when the CVTs came out was that people didn't understand how important the maintenance was on them. And while I would argue that a transmission shouldn't require that much maintenance to stay reliable, I think that's what people didn't know, and they just pushed those fluid changes too long or didn't do them at all. It still is kind of the letdown of these cars because in a lot of other ways, I actually like them better than I like some of the Toyotas and the Hondas out there. The interiors are definitely better. The actual steering, things like that is equal. Fuel mileage is very similar. I do think that they have a couple little gremlins that we talked about underneath the hood, like the, alternator power steering pump, some stuff like that they just really shouldn't have, where Toyota and Honda don't. But in a lot of ways, Nissan's actually pretty decent and sometimes better than its Japanese competitors. But that CVT is a real question mark. Back from the test drive, and now it's time to decide if the Murano is a buy or a bust. The market on these cars, depending on miles, condition a little bit, they're around $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. Now, I will say Nissans tend to be one of the cars that were generally not treated super well, and sometimes maintenance wasn't kept up on them. My biggest concern with these, though, is the maintenance of the CVT transmission and the reliability of it. Nissan is the brand that gave CVT transmissions a bad name in the industry. There's a couple others that had some faults too, but it was mainly Nissan's failures. They really need to be kept up with regular fluid changes on schedule, or the transmissions, unfortunately, will fail. It's kind of a shame because the rest of the car is actually pretty decent. It has one of the nicer interiors. Yes, there's still some cheaper plasticky bits, but this is not a luxury car, and I think it has some cool features and overall is really comfortable for what the car is. That being said, today I cannot ignore the transmission problems, so I'm going to call the Nissan Murano a bust. I don't see many of these transmissions make it to 250, 300,000 miles, which is required for me to call a car a buy. This one runs and drives actually pleasantly well, but I still can't recommend it to someone else. If you have one of these and have had no problems, I want to hear about it. If you love the car, or if you hate it and have had a bunch of issues, I want to hear all about your experience in the comments down below. Appreciate you guys following along. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.